Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, the war on Iran from the occupied West Bank.
Illegal Israeli settlement outposts are growing. Dozens have been established in recent weeks. They are mostly used as launch pads for settler attacks.
As all eyes are on the US, Israel, and Iran, how Palestinians are left behind. I'm David Enders, and this is The Take. Before we continue with today's show, remember to leave us a comment telling us what you think about this episode and what stories you want us to do next. Or on your podcast app, leave us a review telling us where you're listening from and give us a 5-star rating while you're there. It helps the show.
My name is Nour Odeh. I'm reporting for Al Jazeera from Palestine, from Ramallah specifically. I am focusing at the moment on Israeli affairs. And, I've been reporting on and off for Al Jazeera since before we launched Al Jazeera English. So it's been a long journey full of news and wars and so on, unfortunately. But I feel honored and privileged to be able to bring the news to everyone.
And where are you joining us from today? It looks quite cozy.
Well, I'm joining you from my home in Ramallah. I still have a few hours before I get on shift. So you are in my humble abode.
And you were on the late shift yesterday.
Yes. And I that's basically where I'm still at in terms of shifts. So I do what we call the mid shift, which is the afternoon until 10, 11 p.m. local time.
And quite a shift it's been lately. You've been covering things as we're now in the third week of the U.S. and Israeli war on Iran. How are you holding up? How are you doing?
Well, I mean, as best as I can, really. And, you know, this war and covering this war comes after 2.5 years of covering the genocide, of a war on Lebanon, a short war on Iran in June of last year, and on and on. So it's been nonstop, really, for the past 2.5, almost 3 years now. It takes a piece of your soul and mind, really, to to stay collected, to stay focused and grounded, really, in order to bring the news without all the emotions that comes with it.
You know, thank you for all the work you do. What have been the most significant developments of the last 24 hours?
Well, look, this war, part of covering this war for us as Al Jazeera is that we are not coming here to report it. We are of this region. We know the nuance. We know the fine print of what is happening. And so we have a very wide scope in terms of understanding of what is happening, and that the significance is beyond how many missiles were lobbed in one place or another. We see all of the dots that may not seem connected to others. We see how they connect, how what is happening between the US and Israel on the one hand and Iran on the other connects to regional stability, connects to Palestine, connects to Lebanon, connects to the stability and security of countries in the Gulf, and to world economy. And so beyond the reports of the missiles that Iran fired at Israel, the ones that Hezbollah also fired in many instances simultaneously, what we have is a moment in Israeli history where the government, a very right-wing government, feels empowered enough, drunk enough on power and arrogance, perhaps, to take on the whole region. And it's not a matter of interpretation because we've actually heard the Israeli prime minister say that much. And so to understand that, to see that at play, is quite something. You know what's coming, and you're just waiting to tell the news, sort of, which is sometimes hugely frustrating.
I was going to ask you about this a little later in the interview, but since you sort of brought it up, what are the historical parallels for what we're seeing right now? I'm thinking maybe the closest parallel is the 1967 war, which was a regional one. What do you think about what we're seeing in terms of where it fits bigger picture historically?
Well, I mean, there may be some parallels with 1967 because in that war, Israel occupied Jordanian, Lebanese, Syrian, and Egyptian territory, in addition to, of course, the West Bank and Gaza and occupied East Jerusalem. But what is happening right now, I think, is very unique in the sense that you have a convergence of American empire, of a doctrine in Washington that sees the utility of dominance by power, and an Israeli doctrine and ideology that sees the only way for Israel to exist in the region is by dominating it, at the expense of the lives, of the physical presence of the people in it, whether that's in Gaza, in the occupied West Bank, even in southern Lebanon at this point, and parts of Syria. So it is very unique in that sense. It is regional, it is global, really, because the ramifications of what's happening will touch everyone, everywhere. This is not something that only people in the region will feel for years, possibly decades to come. The outcome of what is happening now will affect everyone, everywhere, for a very, very long time.
Stepping back a moment from the regional, you are in Ramallah, in the occupied West Bank. What's been happening there?
Well, look, for Palestinians, two things are happening at the same time, at least Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem. On the one hand, they are caught in the middle of a war they have absolutely no stakes in. They did not participate. They did not have a say in, and they're caught without any protection. So Palestinians do not have shelters. They do not have safe rooms. They don't have any way to even know that missiles are coming unless they hear the sirens going off in one of the many illegal settlements that are, present on their land. So for me personally, whether I'm at work or at home, I hear the sirens in the illegal settlement next to me, and I know that something is coming, but I also know that there's not much I can do about it. So you have to kind of live with that. In the more physical, immediate sense, what has been happening is that the rate of Israeli state and settler violence has increased dramatically. Israeli settlers have killed 7 Palestinians since Israel launched its war on Iran. They've done so with impunity and with the help of the Israeli army. And the Israeli army, of course, continues to raid, to detain, to kill, to execute at will, knowing, of course, at least at the leadership level, that this kind of news is not going to make it. It's not going to be a headline now because the world is on fire and Israel set it on fire. So, for example, Israeli soldiers executed a father, a mother, and 2 children who were on their way home in a car, and 2 kids are injured. Their 2 surviving kids are injured. And it is part of everyday occupation. But to know that it is being done without the world paying attention is quite unsettling. Knowing, of course, that there are political and administrative measures that Israel is taking to complete the takeover of the West Bank. So this violence, whether it's from the soldiers, the occupation army, or the settlers, is part of that drive to take over the land, to complete the annexation and takeover of historical Palestine. And of course, in Gaza, genocide continues, the siege continues, the malnutrition, the deprivation, the fact that more than 2 million people remain in tents without homes, without prospects, without horizon for relief, much less accountability.
More with Noor after the break. So, Noor, you mentioned Palestinians don't have shelters. There's also a danger from overhead as well, correct?
Absolutely. And we've seen several incidents where, Palestinian homes in the occupied West Bank sustained damage. Thankfully, there were no tragic injuries from these interceptions, from these falling shrapnels and so on. But the interceptions happen over the occupied West Bank for a reason. At the end of the day, the Israeli state believes and acts with the worldview that Palestinian lives are expendable. Palestinian safety is not a concern. So, you shoot down these missiles if you can. You say they fell in open areas. These open areas are, the fields and towns of Palestinians.
You mentioned Gaza before. One thing that I've seen people talking about is how now what has happened in Gaza and the way Israel and the U.S. are fighting wars, the methods being used in Gaza have been exported. We're seeing targeting of civilian infrastructure in Lebanon, in Iran. What can you tell us as an observer about what's happening now and what's different?
Look, this is what everybody warned about, right? International law experts, the lawyers, the advocates, that normalizing genocide anywhere will mainstream it everywhere. So the Gaza playbook is being used page by page, and it starts with dehumanization. Not even with the bombing. It starts with dehumanizing the other, with calling Iran an evil a place full of evil people, right? With saying all sorts of things about Iranians to make it psychologically acceptable to commit crimes, to strike a school and kill over 160 school children, to target, the Red Crescent, to target paramedics and hospitals and so on. We saw that with Iran. We saw that with Lebanon. And even if in Lebanon there's an attempt to make a distinction between the evil, so-called evil Hezbollah and the rest of Lebanon, it's still the same, because we saw that even in Gaza. Israel was slaughtering Palestinians at an industrial scale and saying, well, we're doing this for the Palestinians' benefit because they're being held captive by the evil Hamas. So it is the same playbook. You saw the, forced displacement orders in Lebanon. Israel telling the Lebanese where to leave and where to go even. We saw that with the forced displacement orders issued for Dahiya, for Beirut's southern suburb. I have to tell you, it is very triggering, very traumatizing for Palestinians to see this play out again and again. And this is something I've heard, from a lot of friends as well, especially in Gaza. It's like seeing genocide on a loop. You see it repeat, and you see the same players do the same thing and get the same reaction from those who are willing to appease, to excuse, to rationalize acts that cannot possibly be excused or rationalized, like targeting schools or hospitals, like targeting infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, like making life unbearable for the civilians. All of that is playing out, and it's unfortunately getting the same reaction that it did when it happened in Gaza.
Finally, where do we see this headed? Do we see any hope that this comes to an end soon?
Well, I mean, it's going to have to end, right, at some point. Look, the Israelis say that the war that they're launching on Lebanon, because it's so up close and personal, because it's so close to home, so to speak, this is very strategic for Israel. And they have already been very clear the war on Lebanon will outlast the war on Iran. So that gives you an idea that we're looking at weeks of carnage still. As a Palestinian, I've learned, and maybe this is now part of our DNA or collective psyche, that you have to find hope, right? Somewhere in what is happening. And the one thing I think that covering this news, miserable and tragic as it is, that maybe is something to have hope in, is the fact that, yes, the powers that be, the political actors continue to act in the same predictable manner. They continue to fail to rise to the occasion and defend people's right to safety and to life. But I think what Gaza did, what the genocide did, is create an awakening of sorts globally, that war is not an answer and that targeting civilians is inexcusable, period. And they know how to spot the warning signs, right? The dehumanization, the excuses, and on and on. And so you see a different kind of popular reaction immediately, right? It didn't take time. People didn't wait for Israel to make its case or for the US to kind of rationalize what it's doing. They understood what they need to look for. It's a tragic, reality that you have to witness a genocide to kind of spot the signs of war crimes in another place. But I think that is one thing that one hopes can be a stepping stone for something different, for a different reality, where war is not the go-to option, where seeking dominance is not a given, where talking about taking over people's land is not something you just gloss over. But that will unfortunately take time.
Nour Odeh, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. That's a lot to digest.
Thank you for having me.